And in this past weekend, no UFC card. It's been a very busy schedule this year, busier than it's ever been before. And this was actually a blue moon week off of any sort of fight night for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So what better timing for the notorious one himself, Conor McGregor, to come out and have a sit-down live on ESPN interview with none other than MMA's premier journalist himself, Ariel Helwani. And it's been really the talk of the MMA world for the past 5 days because it was the first sit-down interview that he's had in a while, and he did say a lot. Number one, Helwani did right by just coming straight out and asking him about the big altercation in the Irish bar involving a elderly man who apparently insulted his whiskey that Conor clearly on video walked up and hit. And McGregor did come out and apologize for the incident, accepted his guilt for it, seemed to take full responsibility. And this is also just, he's still not in the clear for the sexual assault allegation that was brought against him earlier this year. And on top of that, earlier this year, we also had the case of him breaking that fan's phone, I believe, down in South Florida. And just less than 2 years ago was the infamous Khabib bus attack. So it's just been a long string of incident after incident after incident with Conor McGregor in his outside the cage antics that Helwani did a very good job of bringing to light. And Helwani even went as far to bring up that this isn't an isolated incident. We've seen this story before, Conor. He brought up, he said, we've seen athletes, we've seen entertainers that get rich fast and they self-implode. And he asked him, basically had him do some self-evaluating right there on air. Is this you? And Conor, there's been a lot of breakdown of him, what his mannerisms were in this interview. I heard Brian Campbell of Showtime stated, which I thought was a profound thought. He said that he seemed like a washed-up rock star, which I thought was very interesting, because what we fell in love with Conor McGregor, either love him or hate him, either we loved to hate him or we just loved him for who he was his unshakable and undeniable and clearly authentic confidence and charisma. I didn't see that this much in this interview. I actually saw a man, in my own analysis, that I feel like sees the sport is going on without him. He kind of drank his own Kool-Aid and believed that it wouldn't happen, that he was actually becoming bigger than the promotion. And then when he sees Nate Diaz go out the week before, put on a great performance, first performance since their infamous two fight, just mega fights that they had. And people kind of expected maybe that Diaz would get on the mic and talk about Conor, signaling for a trilogy fight, a big money trilogy fight. Didn't do that at all. He went to Jorge Masvidal, and what does the internet do right afterwards? They love it. That's what they want to see. They're not even worried about Conor. They want to see Masvidal and they want to see Diaz. And I got this idea that you got a guy who sees this sport can survive without him, that there is going to be big fights without him, and that he's trying to stay relevant and fighting to stay relevant. And speaking of fighting, he did indicate in this interview that he was preparing for a late summer return this year, but broke his hand in a sparring match, and said that training's been going good. He looks like he's in good shape by all the photos we've seen. And he says that he's still eyeing a year-end return. And he listed off a plethora of the who's who of all names. He listed the Khabib and Dustin winner. Said he definitely wants to get back to the Khabib rematch. That's what he's got to get. And then for his legacy and for his resume, he does need to get back to the Khabib fight. He mentioned a trilogy with Diaz. He mentioned Jorge Masvidal. He mentioned Justin Gaethje, who he said was actually the front runner of the potential fight for him at the end of the summer if he wouldn't have broke his hand. And Justin Gaethje is getting ready to fight Donald Cerrone, who was also rumored to fight Conor McGregor earlier in the year. He even mentioned Tony Ferguson, which I believe he might be the first person I've ever heard that's actually even uttered his name in a call out. He mentioned a Jose Aldo rematch, which has been kind of rumored about as a possibility. He even mentioned Frankie Edgar, which was kind of odd because Frankie Edgar's just lost at 45 to the title holder Max Holloway and has been talking about dropping down to 35, but they were rumored to fight years ago and never happened, and he even mentioned that he'd be willing to share the octagon with Frankie Edgar. And as I said, my overall analysis of this interview was a man who clearly is now a little bit more anxious to get back in the cage and do what he needs to do because he sees that his reputation, his legacy, his relevance is slipping away and the sport is going on without him. And he's fighting to keep relevant. But the thing is, Conor, that's exactly what you need to do to stay relevant, is to fight.